I never thought one look could change everything. But the night my best friend's older sister held my eyes and whispered, "Stay tonight," I knew I'd already crossed a line I couldn't step back from. I hadn't been to my friend Daniel's house in years. Life had a way of scattering us after college. Jobs, responsibilities, the slow drift of adulthood. But when he invited me over for dinner, something in me wanted the familiarity again. I thought it would be just the same as before. Laughter around the table, the same old couch in the living room, the walls carrying the warmth of a home I'd visited 100 times. What I didn't expect was her. Daniel's older sister, Elena. I remembered her only in fragments from years back. She was always moving too fast for me to really see her then, dropping by between errands, brushing past us with her keys in hand, her laughter echoing down the hall as she left for some gathering or late shift. She was just Daniel's sister, older, busier, part of the background. But when she walked into the room that night, I felt my chest still. She was different now, not in a diminished way. No, in a way that felt sharper, more defined. Her presence was calm, composed, but quietly magnetic. The kind of beauty that doesn't announce itself, but pulls you in before you realize it. Her hair, slightly darker than I remembered, fell neatly around her shoulders. There was a grace in the way she carried herself, like she'd long ago stopped trying to impress anyone, and somehow, that made her impossible to look away from. She looked at me with a soft pause, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly in recognition. And then, she smiled. It wasn't rushed or polite. It was slower, more deliberate, and it carried a warmth that hit me harder than I wanted to admit. "Wow," she said lightly. "You've grown up." It was such a simple line, but the way she said it lingered in me. Her voice was low, measured, and for a second I felt like a boy again, being seen by someone who shouldn't notice me this closely. Later, when she poured me tea, her hand brushed against mine as she passed the cup. A brief, almost unremarkable touch, except it wasn't. Her skin was warm, her movement unhurried, as if the moment didn't need to be rushed away. I told myself it was nothing, a small accident, but I could still feel it after she pulled her hand back. All through dinner, I found my attention divided. Daniel joked and told stories, but I caught myself studying her in the corner of my eye. The way she listened, leaning in with her chin resting lightly on her palm. The way her gaze shifted across the table, landing on me once or twice longer than it should have. I left that night with a question I couldn't shake. When had she stopped being just my friend's older sister and become someone I couldn't ignore? That was the first glance. The moment something in me shifted, quietly but irreversibly. Dinner that night was ordinary on the surface. Daniel filling the silence with his usual stories, his mother occasionally chiming in from the kitchen, but I couldn't escape the undercurrent. It wasn't in the food or the laughter. It was in her. Elena sat across from me, angled just slightly so that when I looked up, my eyes found hers without effort. I told myself I wasn't searching for her gaze, but every time I glanced, it was waiting there. Patient, curious, a little too steady to be accidental. At one point, when the table quieted, she turned her attention directly to me. "So," she said, her tone lighter than her eyes, "how have you been?" Really? That last word sank into me. Really? People usually ask out of politeness, but her question landed differently. Like she was asking me to set down the mask I wear everywhere else. I laughed a little, tried to brush it off. "Busy. Tired. You know how it is." But she didn't let it slide. She tilted her head, studying me with a look that seemed to cut through the casual answer. She didn't press further, but I felt the weight of her silence pulling at me, asking for honesty without demanding it. Daniel picked the conversation back up, telling some story about work, and everyone laughed again. But beneath the clatter of dishes and the warmth of the food, there was this quiet thread pulling us closer, weaving itself between every glance, every half-smile. Halfway through dinner, our knees brushed under the table. It should have been nothing, an accident, an inevitable collision in a crowded space. Except it wasn't. She didn't move right away. Neither did I. For a heartbeat too long, that small point of contact held us in place. My pulse rose, sharp and undeniable, before she shifted slightly and broke it. Later, while Daniel was clearing plates with his mom, I stayed in my seat, sipping what was left of my tea. I felt her eyes on me before I looked up. She was leaning back in her chair, her arms crossed loosely, studying me like she was trying to read something she couldn't quite put into words. I offered a small smile, a silent truce to the tension. She returned it, softer, almost private. It was strange how quickly a home I had once known so well could feel unfamiliar just because of her. How the same walls and same voices could suddenly hum with something unsaid. By the time dessert was served, I realized that I had barely heard half of what Daniel was talking about. I was too caught up in the unspoken awareness building between us. An awareness neither of us had named, but both of us felt. And the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop feeling it. After dinner, Daniel disappeared upstairs to take a call, leaving me in the living room with Elena. The house had that quiet hum after a meal, the soft tick of the clock on the wall, the faint clatter of dishes being rinsed in the kitchen. It should have felt ordinary, but the silence between us was anything but. She sat on the couch, one leg tucked beneath her, a glass of water in her hand. I lowered myself into the armchair across from her, but it felt like the space was too small for the weight in the air. For a while, neither of us spoke. She traced a finger along the rim of her glass, her gaze lowered, thoughtful. Finally, she said, almost offhand but with an edge beneath it, "It's funny how people look at you differently the older you get." Her voice was calm, but something in it carried a quiet ache. I leaned forward a little, instinctively drawn in. "What do you mean?" She let out a faint laugh, though it wasn't really humor. "For men, age seems to add weight, respect, even attraction. For women," she paused, searching for the right words, "it feels like you're slowly fading from the picture everyone else is looking at. People stop seeing you the same way, even when you feel more yourself than ever." I watched her, caught between wanting to answer and afraid that whatever I said would sound naive. She was older, yes, but the way she spoke, the rawness of it, made me forget the years between us. I hesitated before speaking. "I don't think you're fading at all." She looked up then, her eyes finding mine. There was a softness there, a flicker of something vulnerable. For a second, I thought she might smile, but she only held my gaze, as though measuring how much I meant what I'd just said. The silence stretched. My hand rested on the arm of the chair, close enough to the edge that if she reached across, her fingers could have brushed mine. I felt the impulse rise in me, to bridge that tiny gap, to let her know without words that she was wrong, that she was more present, more seen than she realized. But then she shifted, adjusting her glass, leaning back slightly. The moment folded in on itself, retreating. And in that retreat, reality returned. The divide between us. She was Daniel's sister. She was nearly 20 years older. She was supposed to be untouchable, someone I respected from a distance, not someone I sat across from fighting the urge to reach for. I leaned back in my chair, forcing my gaze away, swallowing down the thoughts I couldn't let breathe. But even as I tried to push it aside, the truth pressed harder against my chest. The more I tried not to see her, the more impossible it became. The sky shifted sometime after dinner, the kind of slow gathering of clouds that sneaks up on you. By the time Daniel had stepped out with a friend, the rain had already started, soft at first, then heavier, pressing against the windows with a steady rhythm. I was still in the living room when the lights flickered once, then again. A heartbeat later, they went out completely. The house fell into shadow, and I let out a quiet laugh, half to myself. Before I could stand, I heard her voice from the kitchen. "Hold on, I've got candles." Her footsteps padded lightly against the hardwood. When she came back, the glow of a single flame lit her face. The flicker danced across her features, softening them, making her look almost otherworldly. She set the candle on the coffee table, then lit another, passing it to me. When her fingers brushed mine, warm against the cool glass, the moment stretched. Neither of us rushed the exchange. It was such a small thing, but it felt heavier than it should have, like even the air knew something was shifting between us. We sat down, this time closer, not separated by the safe space of opposite chairs. The storm outside pressed the walls in tighter, the candlelight pulling us into our own small world. Her shoulder brushed against mine, lightly at first, then steady. I didn't move. She sighed softly, settling into the couch. "Funny, isn't it? How quiet everything gets when the power's out." "Yeah," I murmured. My voice felt lower than usual, like the silence around us demanded softness. "It's like you notice the small things more." Her eyes flicked toward me, reflecting the flame's glow. "Exactly." The rain beat harder against the glass, a steady percussion in the background. I became aware of everything. The way her hair had slipped from behind her ear, strands catching the light. The faint scent of her perfume, warm and understated. The subtle rise and fall of her breathing, so close to mine. I wanted to say something. Anything. But words felt clumsy compared to the quiet language of presence. So instead, I let myself notice. The warmth where our shoulders touched. The way my pulse seemed louder in the hush of the storm. The comfort that came not from filling silence, but from sharing it. She shifted slightly, leaning just enough that her arm brushed mine again. It wasn't an accident. Not this time. The contact sent a rush through me, sharp but grounding. It didn't feel like a spark, too sudden, too fleeting. It felt like a slow burn, warmth spreading, settling deeper the longer it stayed. I glanced at her, and she was already looking at me. Not a quick glance, not a slip of attention, but steady, searching. For a moment, it felt inevitable. Like every step of the night had been leading us here, to this stillness, this closeness, this unspoken question hanging between us. Neither of us answered it yet, but we both knew it was there. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it grew heavier, the rain rushing down in sheets against the house. Candlelight flickered on the walls, turning the living room into a smaller, more intimate space. Elena sat with one knee drawn up on the couch, her hand resting lightly over it, eyes turned toward the window, but not really watching the rain. I could feel her thoughts moving, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of things unsaid. She broke it first, her voice quiet, like she wasn't sure she should say the words aloud. It's strange, isn't it? How sometimes the people who end up seeing us the clearest are the ones who aren't supposed to. Her words sank into me, as though she'd plucked a thread I hadn't dared to touch. My pulse kicked. I wanted to ask her who she meant, but I knew. Somehow I knew. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to steady my voice. Maybe it's not about who's supposed to. Maybe it's about who actually does. Her eyes shifted toward me then, meeting mine with a quiet intensity. In the dim glow, I couldn't read them fully. There was no obvious smile, no clear invitation, but there was something there. Something soft, questioning, yet unwilling to retreat. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My chest felt heavy, like every word we weren't saying was pressing down between us. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head just slightly. You don't know what you're saying. Maybe, I admitted. My voice was lower now, steady but cautious. Or maybe I know exactly what I mean, even if I can't explain it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, fragile, like a string pulled tight. My hand rested against the couch cushion, inches from hers, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin even without touching. I thought about reaching for her hand, just to close the distance. But the weight of what that meant, of everything it could change, stilled me. Instead, I asked, softly, do you ever regret it? The way people expect you to live, who you're supposed to let close. Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability she usually kept hidden. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. All the time, the words hung in the space between us, raw and unpolished. They weren't meant as a confession, but they felt like one. I wanted to tell her the truth, that she wasn't fading, that she wasn't invisible, that sitting here with her felt more real than anything else had in years. Instead, I only managed. You don't have to say more. I hear you. Her gaze lingered on me for a long, unbroken moment. And then, so softly I almost missed it, her lips curved into the faintest smile. It was the kind of smile that carried weight. Not playful, not careless, but something closer to surrender. The storm carried late into the night, rain hammering against the windows in an endless rhythm. The power still hadn't come back, though neither of us seemed to notice anymore. The candles had burned low, their flames smaller now, but enough to hold the room in a warm, flickering glow. Elena and I were still on the couch, the silence between us stretched thin but not uncomfortable. She had pulled a blanket loosely over her lap, and I could feel the brush of its edge against my hand on the cushion. Every detail had sharpened. The sound of her breathing, the faint scent of her perfume mixed with rain, the curve of her profile lit by shifting light. I should have left hours ago. That thought pulsed at the back of my mind, heavy and insistent. But every time I imagined standing, taking my jacket, stepping into the storm outside, I couldn't. My body stayed rooted, drawn to the stillness of this room, to her presence. Eventually, I shifted, breaking the quiet. I should probably head out, before it gets too late. Her eyes moved to me slowly, like she'd been expecting it. She didn't speak right away, and in that pause my chest tightened, my throat dry. Finally, she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Do you really want to?" The question hung there, heavier than the storm itself. I searched her face. The flicker of candlelight softened her expression, but her eyes held steady on mine. There was no teasing in them, no casual tone. Just something raw, almost vulnerable, as though she were giving me the smallest glimpse of what she wanted but couldn't say outright. My voice caught. "I don't know." She leaned back slightly, her hand sliding from the blanket to rest gently on the couch beside mine. Not touching, just there, close. Then, with a steadiness that belied the weight of her words, she whispered, "Stay tonight." The room seemed to still around us. The storm, the rain, the candlelight, all of it faded into the background. Those two words filled the air, impossible to mistake. They weren't casual. They weren't polite. They were a choice. Her gaze didn't waver, though I could see the faint rise of her chest, the quiet edge of her own hesitation. She was giving me an opening, but not forcing me into it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Every part of me felt pulled in two directions. The voice of reason reminding me of the gap between us, of Daniel upstairs, of everything that made this impossible. And then the other voice, quieter but truer, telling me this was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't move right away. Instead, I let the weight of her words settle inside me. "Stay tonight." Finally, I nodded. Just once. Small, certain. Her eyes softened, and I saw something shift in her expression. Relief, maybe, or simply the quiet comfort of being met halfway. The storm outside raged on, but in that moment, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. I stayed, not in the reckless way I thought I might. No hurried decisions, no rushing past what the night had already given us. It was slower than that, gentler, almost careful. Elena pulled another blanket from the arm of the couch and draped it loosely across both of us. The candlelight had burned lower, casting the room in a hushed glow that felt removed from time. The storm still pressed against the windows, but inside, the air was steady, warm. She didn't move closer right away, and neither did I. We simply sat there, breathing the same quiet, letting the reality of her words, "Stay tonight," settle between us. My hand rested on the cushion, and eventually, I felt hers slide into it. No hesitation this time. Her fingers threaded gently with mine, certain, grounding. That single touch felt more intimate than anything else could have been. Her hand was warm, steady, a quiet anchor in the flickering light. I didn't even realize how much tension I had been carrying until that moment, like I could finally exhale. We talked then, though not about the storm or the candles or anything ordinary. Our words wandered into the hidden corners we rarely shared with anyone. She told me about her childhood summers, the way she felt invisible in her 20s, the fears she carried now about being alone. I told her about dreams I'd buried under responsibility, about the ways I often felt like I was performing a life rather than living it. The hours slipped by unnoticed. It wasn't confessions of love, not yet. It was something quieter, something deeper, the unguarded honesty of two people who had stopped pretending. At some point, her head found its way to my shoulder. The weight of it was delicate but certain, her hair brushing against my jaw. My arm lifted naturally, wrapping around her without thought. She fit there as though she had always been meant to. In that stillness, with her cheek against me, I became aware of the sound of her breathing, steady and calm, syncing with my own. I felt her heartbeat faintly where our bodies touched, and the simplicity of it struck me harder than any words could. When dawn finally began to bleed through the curtains, she stirred slightly, but didn't move away. The candle on the table had burned down to almost nothing, leaving only the soft gray of early morning light. Her voice came quiet, almost fragile. "I don't know what happens after this." She paused, as though searching for courage. "But I don't regret asking you to stay." I tightened my arm around her, my voice just as soft. "And I don't regret saying yes." The words weren't a promise of forever. They were a promise of now. And somehow that was enough. Because in that moment, with the storm past and the morning light breaking around us, I knew I didn't need to think about tomorrow. What mattered was that I had stayed. and she had asked me to.